John Elway was the quarterback who had it all: jaw-dropping arm strength, a knack for fourth-quarter heroics, and the adoration of Denver fans. Let's dive into the full story of John Elway's rise from a high school kid with a cannon arm to a back-to-back Super Bowl champion who left the game on his own terms. From the outside, Elway's early life looked like a non-stop tutorial on how to become a quarterback legend. His father was a football coach, which meant the family moved around a lot. Ultimately, they landed in the football hotbed of Los Angeles. Elway enrolled at Granada Hills High School, and the program's head coach, Jack Neumeier, turned out to be the perfect match for a kid who'd rather fling the ball 40 times a game than settle for a dull run-first scheme. As rumor has it, if his father had picked a different school, Elway might have ditched football for baseball entirely. While he was tearing up the gridiron, Elway also dazzled on the diamond, enough to attract interest from major league scouts before he even set foot in college. His right arm was so powerful that his receivers at practice complained about how painful it was to catch his passes. In fact, some guys switched to using their chest for receptions, only to wind up with a faint imprint of the football's seams, a mark so legendary it earned the nickname the Elway Cross. The Kansas City Royals noticed that arm, drafting him fresh out of high school. Still, he chose to enroll at Stanford University, where he continued to split his time between baseball and football. At Stanford, Elway's reputation skyrocketed. He amassed over 8,000 passing yards, shattered nearly every meaningful conference record, and solidified his status as the NFL's can't-miss prospect. Pro scouts drooled over his potential, and fans were already imagining the day he'd transform their team into a juggernaut. But the reality of the NFL draft can be as dramatic as any soap opera, and Elway got caught in the crosshairs when the Baltimore Colts secured the first overall pick in 1983. Here's the twist. Elway wanted no part of the Colts. Their head coach, Frank Kush, had a demanding reputation, and the franchise had struggled in recent years. Elway's camp warned the Colts not to draft him. They didn't listen. He retaliated with the threat to abandon football for baseball rather than suit up for a franchise he had no faith in. Some called it arrogance. Others viewed it as a savvy decision for a generational talent who needed the right environment to shine. Either way, Baltimore blinked first. Realizing the predicament, they traded him to the Denver Broncos. In Denver, Elway faced immediate turbulence. Being the #1 pick is one thing, but forcing a trade as a rookie made him a target for criticism. And he quickly discovered that Sunday afternoons in the NFL were nothing like Saturdays at Stanford. His rookie season was marked by erratic passing and some downright brutal games against fierce defenses. He finished with more interceptions than touchdowns, and questions arose about whether he could adapt to the speed and complexity of the pro game. However, the Broncos were patient. Fans saw flashes of that brilliant arm strength and creative flair even amid the growing pains. By his second and third years, he'd begun fine-tuning his game, cutting down on mistakes and flashing the fearless approach that would later become his signature. In the 1986 season, everything gelled. He dialed back the interceptions, threw for more than 3,000 yards, and led the Broncos to an 11-5 record and the top seed in the AFC. That campaign set the stage for the moment that would define John Elway as the comeback king. A dramatic showdown in the AFC Championship against the Cleveland Browns, forever memorialized as The Drive. With the Broncos pinned at their own 2-yard line, down 7 points, and only a few minutes left, Elway masterminded a nearly perfect 98-yard march. It was part fearless passing, part gritty scrambles, a beautiful exhibition of both raw skill and icy composure under pressure. The tying touchdown had Broncos fans in Cleveland's Municipal Stadium roaring with disbelief, and Denver eventually seized the win in overtime. Although Denver lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl that year, Elway's reputation was changing. He was no longer the kid who struggled as a rookie. He was now the unstoppable force you never wanted to face in a high-stakes moment. But the heartbreaks kept stacking up. In quick succession, Denver reached 2 more Super Bowls, 1987 and 1989, only to lose both in lopsided fashion. It didn't matter how many yards Elway threw for or how many improbable comebacks he delivered along the way. Once the Broncos got to the grand finale, they fell short, and critics were quick to point fingers at number 7. Some even labeled him as a big-game choke artist. Others thought the team's supporting cast was the real issue. Either way, he seemed destined to be the quarterback who could win almost everything, except a ring. Over the next few seasons, the Broncos shuffled coaches, searching for that secret sauce. Dan Reeves gave way to Wade Phillips, then finally to Mike Shanahan, who had once served as Denver's offensive coordinator. With Shanahan's arrival, things slowly began to turn around. By the mid-1990s, Elway was in his 14th season, and fans wondered how long he could keep pushing himself. He wasn't the same spry gunslinger he'd been in the 80s, but the precision and leadership were as sharp as ever. Then came 1997, the season that changed everything. At 37 years old and playing in his 15th season, Elway once again guided the Broncos to the Super Bowl. The opponent? Brett Favre and the reigning champion Green Bay Packers. Most odds makers figured Green Bay would roll to another title, but Elway and the Broncos had a different plan. In that legendary game, Denver's running back Terrell Davis carried the ball with ruthless efficiency, exploiting Green Bay's shaky run defense. Meanwhile, Elway didn't need to throw 30 times to leave his mark. His iconic moment came when he scrambled on third down, lunging headfirst into contact from multiple defenders to pick up a crucial first down. The hit spun him in the air, a sequence forever known as the helicopter play. And Denver turned that energy into a touchdown. Late in the fourth quarter, Elway orchestrated one more heart-stopping drive, setting up Davis for the go-ahead score and sealing the Broncos' first-ever Super Bowl victory. Finally, Elway had done it. The ring that had eluded him for so long was now his. And he wasn't finished. The following year, at the remarkable age of 38, he led the Broncos to an even better 14-2 record, then cruised through the playoffs for a second consecutive Super Bowl appearance. This time, the Atlanta Falcons stood in the way, coached by none other than Dan Reeves, Elway's old boss who had been at the helm for those 3 crushing Super Bowl losses. In a poetic twist, Elway torched Reeves' Falcons with a 336-yard passing performance, earning Super Bowl MVP honors in what turned out to be his final NFL game. When he retired in 1999, Elway left behind a legacy of 51,475 passing yards, the most victories by a starting quarterback at the time, and a well-earned reputation for never giving up, even when critics insisted he'd never win the big one. Just 5 years later, in 2004, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, a place he had always seemed destined to end up. Plenty of quarterbacks put up big stats. Few faced the repeated Super Bowl failures he did, only to keep refining their game, never letting the weight of expectations break them. And fewer still had the storybook ending he managed to script for himself, winning 2 consecutive championships, riding off into the sunset with an MVP trophy in hand. What do you think? Is Elway's story the ultimate redemption tale for a quarterback who refused to accept anything less than greatness? Or is it simply proof that, in the NFL, even the best sometimes needs the right breaks at the right time? Either way, there's no denying the magnitude of John Elway's legacy. He was everything his father imagined he'd be back in those high school days at Granada Hills, and then some.